Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohioan. So today we're going to be doing the long-awaited documentary on the politics of every U.S. territory. So before we begin analyzing the politics of the territories of the United States, I feel we first need to define what a territory is. The United States government defines a territory as a subnational administrative division overseen by the United States federal government. Basically, a territory is defined by the U.S. government as land under control of the federal government but given various degrees of self-governance by Congress. This term applies to several locations around the globe, but the most common and discussed are Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, the Northern Mariana Islands, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. These islands have the most autonomy from the federal government and are basically self-governing. So, in the first part of this mini-series, we'll be analyzing the three smaller territories. These include American Samoa, the Northern Mariana Islands, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. These three territories are the smallest of the five, both in population and size. Puerto Rico and Guam have much more complex systems of government, so we will be giving them their own video. Now that we have defined the meaning of a territory, and we have laid out which we will be covering, let's get into the first territory, American Samoa. American Samoa is an island located in the South Pacific. Its total landmass is about 199 square kilometers, which makes it similar in size to Washington, D.C. American Samoa is also the southernmost territory of the United States. American Samoa was first settled by Polynesians sometime before the 18th century. The island was a major hub of several Polynesian chiefdoms during the Tumanus and several other Pacific Island nations. In 1722, Dutchman Jacob Roggeveen became the first Western man to see the island. He named it Bowman Island after one of his ship's captains. American Samoa remained Bowman Island until the 1830s, when missionaries from Europe arrived and began to try to convert the settlers to Christianity. This was the first major contact the settlers had with Westerners. Contact with Westerners would become much more frequent as the Americans, Germans, French, and English eventually began using the island as a refueling station for long shipping voyages. The island became under American jurisdiction in 1900. American Samoa is divided into several islands and atolls, with the largest both in size and population being Tutuila. Tutuila is home to the capital of American Samoa, Pago Pago. Interestingly, American Samoa is the only territory where citizenship is not granted at birth, and the people there are seen as non-citizen nationals. American Samoa's official languages are English and Samoan, with almost every citizen bilingual and able to easily communicate in both. Samoa is a very Christian territory, with 98.3% of the island adhering to the Christian faith. American Samoa is about 88% Samoan, 2.9% Tongan, 2.2% Filipino, 1.2% European, and 2.2% other. American Samoa's economy is mostly agricultural and fishing based, with the largest sector of the economy being tuna fishing. Military service is also very common, as the U.S. Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard all have several stations and bases on the island. American Samoa's GDP is around $600 million and has maintained that number since 2005, only decreasing and increasing by small percentages since. With American Samoa's demographics, religion, and economy laid out, let's look at the politics of this territory. All elections in American Samoa are officially nonpartisan. However, the governor and lieutenant governor of the island are registered Democrats, and Democratic aligned members control the territory's state legislatures. The governor and lieutenant governor were both elected and re-elected in 2020, receiving 60% of the vote. They destroyed a slew of other independent candidates, with the runners-up in both races receiving 21 and 20% of the vote, respectively. After seeing that, you would assume it's safe to say American Samoa is overwhelmingly Democratic. That said, American Samoa's one representative is a registered Republican. Amada Coleman Rodriguez is the Republican who represents American Samoa in the U.S. House. She won an absolute landslide, taking more than 80% of the vote. Her role is more formal, though, as representatives from territories cannot vote on issues, only observe and provide input. The state legislature was a tricky one to analyze, as it's all independent. That said, the majority of the state legislature appears to be aligned with the Democratic Party despite being independent. Looking at American Samoa's political history, the island is represented by independents who align with the Democratic Party since 2000. As a matter of fact, no candidate for governor from 2000 to 2020 was a Republican. Both candidates were Democrats. The last Republican governor in office was from 1989 to 1993. The lieutenant governor has also been held by Democrats since the mid 1990s, although they have a history of not winning by as large margins. With that, I have to say American Samoa is a Democratic stronghold. Yes, they have an elected Republican, but I think that if she actually had voting powers, she would have been defeated. She would have been defeated a while ago. I am putting American Samoa as a safe Democratic territory. The Northern Mariana Islands. The Northern Mariana Islands have been an American territory since 1975. Prior to being a territory, they were a Spanish colony first settled in 1521. The islands were eventually taken over by the United States in 1898, following the Spanish-American War. Just a year later, the islands were sold to Germany by the United States. They would then be under the control of the Japanese following World War I. The islands were used as a staging ground for the Japanese invasion of Guam following Pearl Harbor. Finally, in 1944, the islands would be conquered by the United States on their road to Tokyo. From then on, the Northern Mariana Islands and Guam will go through a long and complicated process guided by the United Nations about whose jurisdiction they would fall under. Eventually, after several referendums, they became American territories in 1975. The Northern Mariana Islands are smaller than American Samoa, with a total area of only 179 square miles. The islands are also much more diverse, with 55% of residents identifying as Asian, 33% identifying as Pacific Islander, 12% identifying as multiracial, and 2% identifying as white. When it comes to religion, the Northern Mariana Islands are also very Christian, with 81.3% adhering to the Christian faith. The remaining 20% are made up of Buddhists and Muslims. The island's economy has a controversial history. Since the Northern Mariana Islands are technically a part of a free trade zone, despite being a U.S. territory, the islands have found a loophole in free trade agreements while not being under U.S. labor laws. This has made the Northern Mariana Islands infamous for having a $3 minimum wage until 2007, when then President George Bush signed a law that would require the minimum wage to increase by 50 cents every year. Eventually, in 2018, the island's minimum wage met that of the U.S. average of $7.25 an hour. The island's exemption from labor laws has also caused many controversies, and there are many rumors of sweatshops and child labor due to lax regulations and few to enforce them. That said, the island's economy is mostly based around scrap metals, manufacturing, and some agriculture, and non native islanders are not allowed to own land. The island's capital is Saipan, with a population of around 47,000. It is home to the territory's Capitol building and parliament. With that, let's look at the Northern Mariana Islands politics. The Northern Mariana Islands are famous for having the only Republican governor of the territories, and that's no surprise either when you look at history. The Northern Mariana Islands have been a solidly Republican leaning territory and have not had a Democratic governor since the mid 1990s. To make even more interesting, the Northern Mariana Islands had a local party called the Covenant Party during the 2000s, which was actually a right wing populist party. The Covenant Party was socially conservative, fiscally populist, and advocated for economic reform. This was during the scandals of the labor laws, but were still pretty right leaning overall. They actually won several seats in the territory's legislature and had a governor elected in 2005. Eventually, the party fizzled out when it merged with the state GOP in 2012. Ralph Torres is the current Republican governor of the Northern Mariana Islands, and he was first elected as the lieutenant governor to Eloy Enos in 2014 after the Covenant merged with the GOP. They won with 56% of the vote over independent candidate Heinz Hofschneider's 43%. Sadly, in 2015, Eloy Enos passed away due to heart problems, and Ralph Torres was sworn in as governor. The 2018 governor race was supposed to take place on November 6, 2018, along with the rest of the midterms, but due to a typhoon, it was delayed until November 13. On election night, Ralph Torres was declared the winner with 62% of the vote, overperforming the 2014 results. He defeated former governor Juan Barbuada. Now, while it may sound great that the Northern Mariana Islands elected a Republican in a landslide, it's not really all that great. Ralph Torres isn't super conservative on most issues. He's about your standard Republican to a liberal Republican. For example, Ralph Torres signed a massive tax on guns in 2018. The law decreed that when you bought a pistol, you had to pay a $1,000 tax to the government. It was actually ruled unconstitutional and repealed. Torres has also legalized marijuana on the islands, although it's an issue that have been losing ground on for a while. That said, Torres did endorse and support Trump in 2016 and 2020. With that, I'm putting the Northern Mariana Islands in the lean R column. They have a long history of electing Republicans on both a local and federal level, and their state legislature has a Republican majority. The only reason the Northern Mariana Islands are more Republican is the fact that the Republicans they elect are more liberal ones. The U.S. Virgin Islands. The U.S. Virgin Islands are located in the Caribbean just east of Puerto Rico. They have a population of around 87,000 and were first settled by the Danish in 1672. They were a major location for sugarcane and slaves. The islands were also home to the first major slave rebellion, which took place in 1733. African slaves from modern day Ghana revolted and took control of the island of St. John for 6 months before the Danish military moved in and defeated them. It was a brutal time, with many slaves killing themselves before they could be taken back into slavery. After another slave uprising, the governor of the islands abolished slavery in 1848. However, the strict labor laws were passed, making many former slaves basically still slaves, but not slaves under the law. This led to a massive riot in 1878. Following this, many Danish landowners abandoned the islands, leading to the collapse of the islands' economies. During World War I, the Germans became interested in purchasing the islands from Denmark to build a submarine base. The United States, who feared having a German base right in their backyard, moved in and bought the islands from the Danes in 1917 for $25 million. The islands have remained under U.S. control ever since. Due to the island being a former slave colony, 76% of the population is black, 15% are white, and the rest are a slew of other groups, including Hispanic and Asian. The islands are 94% Christian. The islands have a total area of 133.7 square miles, making them much smaller than American Samoa or the Northern Mariana Islands. The capital is Charlotte Amalie, which is located on the island of St. Thomas. It is also the largest city. The island's economy is mostly based around tourism, with small agricultural and manufacturing sectors. The island has a large GDP, however, with most estimates putting it at $4.58 billion. This makes the U.S. Virgin Islands have the largest economy out of all the other territories we've covered so far. At a quick glimpse of the U.S. Virgin Islands politics, it seems staunchly Democratic. With the governor, lieutenant governor, and representative in Congress all Democrats, the state legislature also has a Democratic majority, with no Republicans in the territory's Congress, just Democrats and independents. However, the island has technically had a Republican governor from 2015 to 2019. Kenneth Mapp is a registered Republican, although he runs as an independent. Mapp expanded the oil industry, built many roads, ports, and bridges, greatly improving the island's infrastructure, and also raised the minimum wage. Mapp had a high approval rating as he managed two hurricanes that hit the island while also improving the territory's economy. Despite this, he lost re election by 10 points to Albert Bryan. Albert Bryan, the current governor, has been an interesting one. His biggest accomplishments include paying off pretty much all of the island's debt, introducing a massive mental health program, and launching a $1 million crime initiative to make the island safer. When the COVID-19 virus hit the U.S. Virgin Islands, Bryan was one of the first governors to shut down his territory. He imposed stricter lockdowns than most governors, but polls showed the people of the U.S. Virgin Islands actually supported these lockdowns throughout the pandemic. He has also been a massive proponent of the COVID vaccine, being one of the first governors to take it and one of the first to launch vaccine lotteries. The lieutenant governor's position has also been held by Democrats, with the current lieutenant governor, Tregnezda Roach, serving since 2019. The U.S. Virgin Islands seat in the House of Representatives has been held by Democrats since the 1980s, with current Representative Stacey Plaskett winning re-election in 2020 with 88% of the vote. The Democratic nominee has not received less than 60% of the vote since 2006. With all these factors, I personally believe that the U.S. Virgin Islands are safe Democratic. They have been electing Democrats over and over by massive margins since the 1990s, and the Republican Party of the islands is basically irrelevant. Conclusion: the territories of American Samoa and the U.S. Virgin Islands are staunchly Democratic and will continue to vote Democrat for some time. That said, they are not afraid to elect the occasional, more moderate Republican to shake things up. The Northern Mariana Islands are much different, as they have been solidly Republican voting on most levels, electing the occasional Democrat here and there. That said, I believe all the territories are much more moderate than that of the rest of the United States, considering the fact they've all have been prone to elect a politician from opposite parties than usual. With that, thank you for watching this first part of the territories of the United States documentary. The next one, featuring Puerto Rico and Guam, should be out very soon. Please be sure to like and subscribe this video, share it with your friends if you enjoyed. I put a lot of effort into this, and yeah, hope you enjoyed.